Hi guys, this is Zach and welcome back to another episode of Lumix tutorial. And this episode we are talking about frame rate, specifically variable frame rate. So what is variable frame rate? Well, commonly we use variable frame rate for really slow motion. For instance, the camera right here, the GH5, can have a variable frame rate up to 240 frames per second, and the GH6 you're using right now can record up to 300 frames per second in variable frame rate mode. So variable frame rate, it's slightly different from what high frame rate is. So commonly when we think about want to shoot slow-mo, we want to shoot in higher frame rate and play back in normal 24 or 30 frames per second. So what variable frame rate does is that when you record and you play back in the camera, it is playback in slow-mo. But while if you're recording a high frame rate, let's say you're recording 120 frame 4K with the GH6, when you play back, it will play back in 120 frames. So you don't see immediately the slow motion result, you have to put it in the software. And because of that, VFR can go way higher than 240 frames. Like they can go up to for the GH6 is 300 frames, normally higher than what the high frame rate maximum frame rate is. So VFR for GH6 is about 300 frames per second, but you will need to compromise something. So when you're recording VFR, you will not have autofocus and you will not have audio. If you're good with that, you can push the frame rate higher than what it usually can. So that is one of the most common use of VFR. VFR, why this is so different than high frame rate is because high frame rate are referring to a frame rate that's higher than usual, but VFR are referring to frame rate that are not common to whatever we are used to record. For instance, 24, 30 frames. Meaning VFR can not only go higher, but it can go lower. For instance, you can record VFR in 16 frames, 15 frames per second, depend on the camera model. Some camera can even go down to 6 frames per second. So you have these choppy images, but for some artistic choice, it may be a really aesthetic approach to it. And you can even record in, let's say, 15 frames per second, and you play back in 30, meaning you will have a speed up video. And this is very good for, if you want to speed up something, let's say you want to have a time lapse of something, and you can record in lower frame rate. And lower frame rate means when you tweak the shutter angle, it can also have some really aesthetic motion blur, depending on the director's artistic choice. So you have some very interesting character. So that is also one of the, I would say less common use of VFR, but that is, I think, one of the very beautiful use for VFR. So VFR, you can go really high frame rate. You can also go really low frame rate. Therefore, the word variable frame rate. So there you go. That is a simple walkthrough of VFR. If you want to know more, if you want to see more, regarding this topic, you can comment down below and we will try to talk to you. Until then, I will see you next time.